Good evening to you. Thank you for joining us on From the South. My name is Reagan Devines. We begin with the headlines. Breaking news, the French president has declared a state of emergency as multiple gun and bomb attacks leave dozens dead in Paris. Police end a hostage situation with many casualties. The army has been deployed to confront the crisis. In Venezuela, election fever has begun. Thousands hit the street to support the government. And Colombians remember their loved ones on the anniversary of a deadly volcanic eruption. The details on these stories and more now on From the South. We open with a major unfolding story from Paris, where in the last hours, multiple shootings and explosions have left dozens dead in the area of Stade de France Stadium. President Francois Hollande has declared a state of emergency, closed France's borders and called in the army. These here are live videos shown from Paris. In the last few minutes, the police stormed the Bataclan concert hall where hostages were being held. The attackers exploded grenades inside the theater and a scene of carnage is reported. Earlier, French authorities said at least 45 people had been killed and many more wounded in 7 separate attacks, but those numbers are now likely to rise significantly. The details are still coming in, but there were explosions, possibly suicide bombers, at a stadium during a friendly football match between France and Germany. Other attackers armed with submachine guns reportedly opened fire at 2 restaurants and at the Bataclan Theatre, where those hostages were being held. Now, there had been a bomb threat earlier in the day when an anonymous caller phoned into the Molitor Hotel, where the German team were staying. Sniffer dogs were used to determine whether any threats were imminent. However, the team was allowed back into their hotel a while later. We will update you on our website, telesurtv.net/English, as more information comes in. Thousands of people have taken to the streets across Venezuela on the first official day of campaigning for December's elections to the National Assembly. In Caracas and many other cities, candidates of the governing coalition and their supporters rallied to defend what they see as the gains of the last 16 years, the reduction in poverty and access to health and education for millions of Venezuelans who were previously ignored and excluded. On the 6th of December, voters will elect 167 new members of parliament. There has been a concerted attempt to increase the number of women candidates.
We are going to promise to our President Nicolas Maduro the loyalty and commitment our country needs. From here in Tovar, in Merida, we pledge our commitment and our love for the people, for our country, and for the revolution. A revolution that can depend on the women and men who are ready to struggle.
Streets, as we have done in the past, to defend the social missions and this revolution that is now led by the successor of Chavez, President Nicolas Maduro.
Men and women, old and young, we all support the same thing, the project begun by Chavez for this country, a project of a free and happy people, of hope. Thanks to Chavez, we as women, who were invisible before, now speak out, and we are invincible.
The current president of Venezuela's National Assembly, Diosdado Cabello, said that 18 elections in 16 years show that the revolution's victories have always been peaceful. He spoke at the launch of the campaign in Maturin in western Venezuela.
Out of 19 elections, 18 have been victories for the Bolivian Revolution. That shows that this has been a peaceful process, because they've attacked us from every direction, every day, and now the people are being subjected to an economic war, which is also a psychological war against our people. Yet the Venezuelan people have shown they are extremely attached to democratic values. So what will happen on December the 6th is what should happen. The revolutionary people will go out and vote in an orderly, organized way. And at 8 o'clock that night, we will sit down and wait for the results from the Electoral Council.
Many ordinary voters told Telesur that they do not see these elections as just another routine poll.
They've been using the parallel dollar to undermine investment and production and have a negative impact on people's pockets. But people need to realize that these elections are tremendously important for the future of Venezuela.
What's at stake on December the 6th is this country's democracy. We need to elect a big majority of members at the assembly, maybe 90%, who are with the president and will defend the social missions, education, and culture.
Today is a very special anniversary for Colombia. Take a listen to this.
Mamá, si me escuchas, yo creo que sí.
Mum, if you are listening, I think you are. Pray so that I can walk and these people help me. Mummy, we love you. Daddy, brother, and me. Goodbye, Mother.
That was the face and voice of Omaira Sanchez, one of the over 25,000 people who died when the Nevado de Ruiz volcano erupted 30 years ago in Colombia, wiping out the city of Armero. The volcano had begun showing activity from the start of 1984. Months later, fish started to die in the surrounding rivers. On November 13th, 1985, the Nevado de Ruiz finally erupted. Even though experts had warned the government to take action months before, no one expected that the mudslide would wipe out the entire town. The images of the rescue mission shocked the world. Today, Omaira, whose photo showed her trapped in the debris flashed around the world 30 years ago, is remembered at a small sanctuary on the spot where she died. Rescuers spent 3 long days trying to save her, but they failed. She was 13 years of age. Her tomb is covered with flowers, plaques, candles and toys left by pilgrims who invoke her name almost like that of a saint. Jairo Higuera is the photographer who snapped the famous picture. He was awarded with the World's Press Photo of the Year.
The girl said her grandmother was holding her legs and not letting her go. My grandmother has my legs, she won't let go, she said. She was trapped by walls and the place was flooded. Rescue teams said it was necessary to empty the water to move the walls and save her.
Colombia's President Juan Manuel Santos has announced that a referendum to approve or reject a final peace agreement with the FARC guerrillas will definitely be held next year. Santos said that the vote could come as early as May or June next year. It would allow Colombians to express their opinion on the current peace process being negotiated in Havana. However, the result will not be legally binding. That is one reason why the FARC guerrillas are opposing the referendum. And the leader of the rebel group responded to both the government's announcement of a referendum and its ultimatum to reach a final agreement by March 2016 next year. Via Twitter, Timoleon Jimenez told President Santos that if the deadline cannot be reached, nor should Colombia's Congress be able to change the terms of any agreement reached in Havana. The Colombian Congress has been debating various measures that have not been discussed at the peace talks. Social organizations in Colombia have submitted their latest report on the FARC's unilateral ceasefire, which confirms that the group is complying with its own truce. However, they express concern over the increase in activity by right-wing paramilitary groups and the deployment of the army in those same areas. Our correspondent Natalia Margarita reports from Bogota.
The report notes that between September and October, the FARC didn't engage in any offensive action, while on the Army's side, 1 airstrike and 4 machine gunning episodes were reported. The report acknowledges that the Army has reduced its offensive actions, yet it also continues seizing territory, which could eventually lead to confrontations with the FARC.
Preventive actions should be allowed, and that's why we have proposed to establish a direct hotline between the guerrillas and the army forces, so that in those places where seizures are happening, both sides can agree to take preventive actions to avoid the confrontation.
As the social organizations recognize a substantial de-escalation of the armed conflict, the resurgence of paramilitarism, particularly observed in 5 state departments, is now the biggest concern for the organizations, and mainly for the residents of war-torn areas.
It's pretty clear that the communities fully identify the paramilitaries. They know exactly where they are, but yet the security forces fail to take any action against them. In many places, they have instead established relations with them. One may wonder how the security forces cannot know who the paramilitaries are if everyone else knows.
The fact that the paramilitaries move around properly uniformed and fully identified as such is for the organizations an indicator of the Army's connivance with paramilitarism, a phenomenon that not just threatens the FARC's unilateral ceasefire, but peace construction as a whole.
Paramilitarism implies that there is no security nor guarantee of non-repetition, and that no certainties can be provided, yet to the FARC and ELN guerrillas under a process of negotiations. If paramilitarism continues to be active, it is going to be very difficult to give guerrillas the guarantees that they are not going to be exterminated.
Now the report notes that 7 human rights defenders and social activists were murdered while 3 more were disappeared, a situation that for the social organizations is directly linked to the resurgence of paramilitarism. Natalia Margarita, Telesur, Bogotá.
Following Wednesday's detention and subsequent liberation of 13 teacher training students in Ayotzinapa, Mexico, students of their school in the state of Guerrero marched this Friday to the state capital to protest this new repression by the federal police. Relatives and schoolmates of the 43 students forcibly disappeared on September last year marched to Chipalcingo to demand their appearance and to commemorate the repression suffered in 2007 in the states of Mexico, Jalisco, Hidalgo, Puebla, Chihuahua, and Sonora when teacher training students stormed the Guerrero Congress to demand new educational measures. And in Mexico, there is anger and sharp reactions to that brutal police aggression carried out on Wednesday against a group of Ayotzinapa students. Many activists say the violent clash represents a future campaign to further criminalize the students. Our correspondent Clayton Khan has more.
Recorded by student cell phones, these images show how the Guerrero State Police violently and indiscriminately attacked the group of roughly 150 Ayotzinapa students on Wednesday. The youth say they were only preparing for a weekend commemorative march.
As we know, it was about the October 14th repression in front of the State Congress in 2007, and so we needed to produce the conditions so as to march.
The afternoon attack left, in the end, 8 students seriously injured and hospitalized, including one who survived the September 26, 2014 police attack in Iguala. One of the drivers of the 8 buses recounts his shock over the degree of malice and how the Guerrero police reacted.
A policeman gets aboard and attacks me, beats me, and I tell him, I have nothing to do with this, it's not my fault. And he says, of course it is you, son of a bitch, and I don't know what else. I told him, understand me. The truth is I don't know what to do.
Meanwhile, members from the Tixla Municipal Popular Assembly, the town where the Ayotzinapa school is located, expressed their concern over what they say is the state government's attempt to repress the Ayotzinapa student movement.
It is an unequal struggle. Someone said it was a clash, but how can there be a clash like that when the youth were unarmed? They had nothing. They are simply struggling to find their missing comrades.
According to the human rights defender and advocate of the Ayotzinapa students, Violfo Rosales, the latest incident is part of a recent wave by the authorities to discredit and criminalize the students.
They continue with this line of stigmatizing the students, calling them vandals. They keep looking at them as criminals.
Activists believe the degree of police aggression is a sign to come of the newly acting Guerrero State Governor, Hector Astudillo, who is a member of the ruling Revolutionary Institutional Party, or PRI. Clayton Khan, Telesur, Mexico.
With less than 10 days to go until the second round of Argentina's presidential election, all eyes are on this Sunday's debate between Daniel Scioli of the governing Front for Victory and Mauricio Macri of the right-wing opposition alliance Cambiemos. Both candidates will be laying out the details of their government programs in an effort to win over undecided voters. Scioli has promised to unmask Macri's plans to return to neoliberal economic policies. He says that these could unravel the advances made in Latin American regional integration. Local elections are also set to be held on Sunday in Paraguay. The polls are considered a crucial test for the government of President Horacio Cartes. One of the most disputed local governments is in the capital city of Asunción, where the center-left candidate Mario Ferreiro is challenging the ruling party.
Sería la primera victoria de la oposición en 20 años y eso tiene una repercusión nacional. Pero claro, es apenas el comienzo de lo que podría ser un modelo de concertación que podríamos ensayar para recuperar para los sectores populares el gobierno nacional en 2018, aunque para muchos todavía es muy temprano hablar de esto. Lo concreto es que está dada la posibilidad.
The governments of St. Lucia and Venezuela have signed an agreement that signals a new era of trade in petroleum products between the two nations. The Petrocaribe joint venture agreement was signed on Tuesday afternoon in Castries, St. Lucia's capital. Telesur's Alison Kentish explains.
The Petrocaribe joint venture agreement seeks to enhance trade and ease of doing business in the areas of customs, transportation and operations for Petrocaribe projects. The signing ceremony took place at the office of the Prime Minister in Castries on Tuesday and was witnessed by representatives of both countries. St. Lucia joined the Venezuela-backed Regional Integration, ALBA and Petrocaribe bodies in 2013, making it possible for the country to receive a regular supply of petroleum products from Venezuela at highly concessionary terms. St. Lucia's representative to ALBA and Petrocaribe says the agreement signals the enactment of the mechanism to initiate trade in petroleum products between the two nations, a partnership, he says, that is built on a solid foundation.
We are very happy we have come a very long way because we have had some very challenging moments. As you all know, the price of oil continues to go down. However, Venezuela has maintained that despite whatever happens, the relationship between the countries that form part of Petrocaribe and ALBA will stay. After all, there is only one objective, solidarity, and to ensure that the countries within the region benefit from this good gesture that Venezuela stretches out its hands to fulfill with us.
President of Petrocaribe, Bernardo Alvarez, says this development will not only help St. Lucia in its quest for energy security, but the country will also benefit from Petrocaribe funds for social and economic development.
St. Lucia has been working very good with ALBA. And as you know, there have been a lot of support from ALBA to St. Lucia. Now is the time for Petrocaribe. And believe me, it's going to open a very big door of opportunities for the development of this nation, and also for the Petrocaribe Economic Zone, and for many of the projects that we are now looking as a new phase of Petrocaribe, who is, as you know, now in his 10th anniversary.
On June 29, 2005 in Venezuela. Its membership includes every independent member country of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States. Alison Kentish, Telesur, St. Lucia.
Coming up after the break, the deadly violence continues in the West Bank. An update on the region next.
Luak gav. Tavili.
That have marked the course of history. Productions designed in the English language language and made for the English-speaking world. This is Documentary. Watch it on telesur.net/English. Telesur, wherever the news, you'll be there.
Wherever the news, you'll be there.
Loud, exasperated screams from after another suicide bomber killed at least 19 Shiite Muslims in the Al-Ashara Al-Mubashari Mosque in South Baghdad. Another 33 people were wounded. Authorities said there has been no immediate claim of responsibility for the incident and that suicide bombings are orchestrated exclusively by Sunnis in Iraq. A coalition of youths is urging the region to increase protests against the Israeli coalition despite the death of more than 80 Palestinians at the hands of Israeli forces since October. Our correspondent Noor Harazin has more.
The Intifada Youth Coalition, composed of Palestinian youth activists, has argued the Palestinian people to step up their protests against the Israeli occupation forces, naming Friday, November 13, the day of loyalty to the martyrs who have been killed by Israeli forces across the Palestinian territories since the beginning of the Intifada last month of October. The announcement was made at a press conference held in Gaza City Thursday, in which they argued Palestinian crowds to clash with Israeli forces at key areas near the border with Israel.
We call on the Palestinian people and especially the Palestinian youth who exploded in the first and second intifadas to escalate the intifada against the occupier and to make Friday, November 13th a day in commemoration of the martyrs of the Palestinian people. We support the option of the Palestinian youth to escalate the intifada and challenge the Zionist arrogance, which is clearly represented in the executions carried out against our youth.
According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health, since the beginning of October, Israeli forces have injured more than 4,000 Palestinians and killed more than 80 people, including 18 children and 4 women. A statement published by the Intifada Youth Coalition confirmed that these Palestinian deaths at the hand of the Israeli forces will not break their will in defense of Palestine. After Friday prayer, dozens of Palestinian protests from Gaza headed in a rally toward the Erez crossing in northern Gaza Strip, hurling stones and Molotov cocktails at the occupation forces stationed in the area. Israeli soldiers responded by firing tear gas to disperse the crowds. No injuries were reported. Noor Harazin, Telesur TV, Gaza.
And now a brief look at other stories making news around the world.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says that the climate in the region is changing. He met with officials from his armed forces to talk about a new defense plan that takes into account the threats that Russia currently faces. Ahead of the COP21 climate change summit in Paris, France has ramped up security around the city. Reports are that some 30,000 police officers will be involved in keeping the city safe. About 115 leaders are expected to attend the historic event. After 1 week of strike action, the main cabin crew of airline Lufthansa threatened to continue their action against the organization. For 2 years, they have been butting heads with the management over early retirement benefits and pensions. And in Italy, protesters say that new education reforms benefit private schools while public schools go underfunded. Thousands marched across 30 cities demanding that Prime Minister Matteo Renzi and Education Minister Stefania Gianni address their concerns.
The driest place on earth would not necessarily come to mind if you're thinking of a marathon. However, that's exactly what happened in Chile. In the Atacama Desert, 22 runners from 9 countries took part in the marathon, which got to an altitude of over 14,000 feet and sometimes with temperatures reaching the mid-20s Celsius. The winner was an Australian man named Doug Wilson, who said that the location was the most insanely beautiful place he has ever experienced. And to close this evening, Star Wars fans will love this one. It's a Star Wars Winter Wonderland. That's what they're calling the figurines, which employed the use of 500 tons of ice and the skills of 30 sculptors. And this all happened in Liège, Belgium, ahead of the 2015 release of the latest Star Wars flick. The Frozen Star Wars universe opens on November 14th and goes until January 31st, 2016. That's how we end this evening. To follow up on these stories and others, please visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. From our news teams in Quito, Ecuador, and right here in Caracas, Venezuela, my name is Reagan Veens. Have a great evening and a safe weekend.